Welcome to the Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community, a space where justice meets action and community voices rise. Each episode, we bring you stories from the front lines, changemakers, disruptors, and everyday heroes who are building a more just, equitable, and liberated world. This is more than a podcast. It's a call to listen, learn, and move together. You were just listening to music from the incredibly talented Stephen Kong. You can find him on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today we have with us Gabrielle Antolovich. Gabrielle is the board president, CEO of the Billy DeFrank LGBTQ+ Community Center. Founded in 1981 in response to the repeal of LGBTQ+ housing and employment protections in Santa Clara County, the Billy DeFrank Center began as a 2-room storefront in downtown San Jose and quickly became a beacon of possibility for the South Bay's LGBTQ+ community. More than 4 decades later, the DeFrank Center serves thousands each week at its home on the Alameda and through its resource line, connecting LGBTQ+ people of all ages and backgrounds to affirming services across the region from Foster City to Gilroy. Named in honor of William Prince, also known as Billy DeFrank, an African-American drag performer and beloved activist of the 1970s, the Billy DeFrank Center carries forward his spirit of inclusion, love, and generosity. Today, the Billy DeFrank Center remains what it has always been, a safe place to gather, a catalyst for action, and a place to call home. Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you. I think you do amazing, incredible work that really empowers folks. How are you doing today?
It's one of those days where, stuff is happening in the world right. And wanting to, make sure we're good here.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I can't wait to hear more about, your stories and the work that you do. But just to start us off, can you introduce yourself and share your role at the Billy DeFrank LGBTQ+ Community Center?
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Antolovich, and I'm the board president, CEO of the Billy DeFrank LGBTQ+ Community Center. Oh. And I used to be an employee back in 1993,
Wow.
But the last 10 years I've been on the board, and we are 100% volunteer run.
Wow, actually I didn't know that. Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it turned out to be a good thing when COVID happened, because then we didn't have employee issues, because many jobs don't lend itself to working at home. And right. So that caused a lot of problems with a lot of workplaces. Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. I love that model. And so when someone walks through the doors of Billy DeFrank Center for the first time, what do you hope that they feel?
Well, in some ways, it's interesting to watch because we have a lot of color everywhere.
I love that.
And so people are looking around and, so it's really nice because we're not a corporation. And so we don't have to have bland walls with, little bushes of flowers and, special art. So we completely queerified the center. Okay. And so when people walk in, I'm sure at first it's like, oh, this is for me.
Yeah, no, I really, really love that a lot. And can you tell me more? What does community mean to you personally? And how does that show up with the work that you do at the center?
Well, I've always been community oriented, even as a child. And so there's just something about being part of a bigger conglomeration of people. My parents were immigrants from Europe after the Second World War, and I was born 5 months after they arrived. And so English is my third language, but our whole street was full of immigrants. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of us kids, we
Uh-huh.
played together and
That's
we
beautiful.
talked about our parents having a hard time being in an English speaking country that does
Right.
things different from where they came from. And it just felt good to be able to talk about that because we didn't know what to do about our poor parents who were crying, missing their
Mm-hmm.
parents and missing the food that they came from. Because after the Second World War,
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Australia, but the same thing happened in America. We didn't have the diversity of restaurants and food, and that was
Okay.
just beginning to evolve. And so people were missing their food. And
Yeah.
people don't understand how important that is,
Yeah.
And we would talk about the food that our parents made, 'cause everyone was from different countries. And we would,
Yeah.
at school, swap, lunches to try each other's food.
Yeah.
And so that built community. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's such a wonderful journey. And so the DeFrank Center was founded in 1981, and this was during a moment of political backlash and lost protections. So why do you think that it's important to remember that origin story today?
It's extremely important because we're back in it.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened is after Stonewall happened,
Mm-hmm.
lots of different groups of people were looking at different aspects and weren't necessarily working together in the 1970s.
Okay.
Um, and what happened is when this ordinance came up about anti-discrimination in housing and employment, it
Okay.
brought everyone together because that was like a commonality, no matter
Mhm.
what your issues were, no matter what your LGBTQ club was about.
Okay.
And it failed. And so everyone was depressed. And
Okay.
so, having had a taste of working together, they wanted to meet under the same roof. And
Right.
and
Right.
that was sort of like the impetus for that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And so William Price or Billy DeFrank was known for his generosity, activism, and love. So how does his spirit still live on in the center's work today?
Well, what happened is he was the only one that got along with everyone.
Okay,
He
okay.
was an African American drag queen. What did
Uh-huh.
he have to lose? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he gave everyone money from his drag shows,
Uh-huh.
and he was known as Mr. Love because he would always hug
Oh,
people and be really good. And he was a stickler as a drag queen. He believed
okay.
that you should um, actually sing the songs, not mime them. Oh my God. And
Okay.
he was definitely into you got to dress nice as a
Mm,
drag queen, all of these things that people have forgotten.
yeah.
And what happened is that when it came to the naming of the center,
Okay.
his name came up the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
glad we named the center not after his name, which is William Price, but after
Mm-hmm.
his drag name, Billy
Okay.
DeFrank. Yeah,
Okay. No,
it's not a
that's
French
interesting.
name, it's a drag name.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I don't- do you know like the story behind like how that became his name?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so what happened is
Yeah.
he died of a heart attack in 1980, a
Okay.
year before we opened up the center. But
Uh-huh.
then the AIDS crisis happened. And so
Okay.
most of the people that knew him actually died of AIDS.
Oh,
And
wow.
so he got lost in the trauma of that.
Okay.
And this was when lesbians started to step in and help gay men, because they lost their partners and friends. And so
Right.
that brought the lesbian and gay men together. But
Okay.
Billy DeFrank got lost in the mix. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time, but I
Hmm.
moved up here in 1990 and I asked, who was Billy DeFrank? And people couldn't answer it.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, you know, it was a bit of a tough thing. And so people kind of knew him and talked about him, but it wasn't a big deal. So
Uh-huh.
when I became the board president 10 years ago,
Okay.
it was my mission to bring him back
Right,
into
right, right.
consciousness. And
Absolutely.
I wasn't quite sure how to do that. So I started off doing bigger than life size blow ups of photos of him and put
Wow.
them around the center to make people ask, who's that?
Uh-huh.
And we would, talk about, and we had blow ups of him as William Price as well.
Okay. Okay. No,
And
that's really
so
wonderful.
eventually, when
Mm-hmm.
it came to our 40th anniversary, it hit, let's do a mural.
Right, right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then it took me a year to find an African American queer
Mhm.
artist that
Oh,
could
that's
do the
cool.
mural. And it was worth waiting for because
That's really
when you
cool.
see the
Mhm.
beautiful mural, it's incredible,
No, I
you
think
know?
that's really cool about the intentionality behind the artist who like created that art. I
Oh,
actually saw a
yeah.
picture of the mural. It's really beautiful.
And Serge Gay Jr., the artist,
Okay.
he was saying when he was painting it, he was talking to Billy DeFrank.
Wow. Okay, that's
Yeah,
cool. That's
because
wonderful.
Serge Gay Jr. is young
Right.
and vibrant and a fantastic artist. Oh my God. But he
Yeah.
was talking to Billy DeFrank while he was painting him.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you something funny. What the mural has him split in half. Half is
Okay.
William Price, and the other half is Billy DeFrank, the drag queen.
Okay. Okay.
So when Serge Gay Jr. was painting him, he had only William Price, and I said, "You forgot the Billy
Oh,
DeFrank
okay.
side." And he
Right.
turned around. He said, "Gabrielle, you always paint the face first and then put the
Oh,
makeup on."
wow, that's so
Yes.
cool. That's really
And I'm
awesome.
going, I had no idea.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Yeah,
I've never heard of like the art being able to like literally put on makeup on a painting like you would with a
I
regular
know.
face.
So
That's really
that was
cool.
very funny. And I said, I will never say anything again while you're painting.
Yeah, no, I love that. No, thank you for explaining
Yeah,
that. That's really beautiful. And I
I
know you were
know.
talking, yeah, yeah. And then I know you were talking about this a little before, but I'd love to further explore this with you because history is really important to me as well. I think it's important for us to know, what's happened in the past so we don't, like repeat things in the present. So, in what ways do you see the legacy of early LGBTQ plus organizing, such as Stonewall and local resistance, informing today's movement?
Well, let's face it, we're
Mhm.
in a backlash,
Right, right.
and it's not the first backlash. When Stonewall happened and we all came out of the closet, I
Hmm.
was involved with the first gay community center in Sydney, Australia.
Oh,
And
okay.
we weren't responding to Stonewall, but it
Hmm.
was time to come out of the closet.
Right.
We had all been community organizers,
Hmm.
anti-Vietnam War movement. We were against the draft.
Uh-huh.
And then the anti-nuke movement, because people were mining uranium on Aboriginal sacred land, and we were
Okay.
outraged and worked with the Aboriginal people on that. And then women's liberation happened. And so we were fighting that. And so the next logical thing, of course, is
Wow.
gay liberation.
Right.
And so we burst out of the closet and we made a lot of movement forward,
Okay.
fighting the fact that gay men's sex was illegal. So,
Hmm.
police could come into their home and whatever.
Okay. Wow.
And so we got these changes made. But then there was a backlash,
Uh-huh.
like in the 1970s, I couldn't get a job
Wow.
because I was an out gay person. And they could
Wow.
tell me to my face, we can't hire you. You're
Wow.
gay. And there were no anti-discrimination policies back then. That's why when in Santa Clara County, people
Mm-hmm.
were wanting anti-discrimination policies in housing and
Oh, okay.
also in the workplace, that was really important because without that, they can say, no, we're not hiring you. And they
Wow.
could kick you out of housing if they know that you're, you know, queer people. It's like, what? So there
Yeah.
was the backlash already, before. And
Right.
we are finding now we have another backlash. The
Yeah.
moment we heard that there are now only two genders,
Right.
male and female,
Yeah.
I went, oops, we are,
Yeah.
beyond back in a backlash.
No, I agree
Absolutely.
with you too. Actually, I feel like I recently purchased airline tickets and I don't remember like gender ever coming up before, but it did only have like the two. And I felt like, we've been coming to a place where there's like multiple choices and it didn't even say like, male,
Yeah,
female, or other. It just said male, female. And
I
yeah,
know.
yeah, I'm like,
And
wow, to get a plane
and
ticket.
and I'm, non-binary myself,
Uh-huh.
but I'm a particular kind of non-binary. Every non-binary person is a very different expression of that. So
Oh,
it's not
okay.
like male, female, non-binary. No, there's
Right,
many,
right,
many expressions of all
right,
of it. And that's what the backlash is about.
right, right.
And it's starting off with trans folks, but it's going to trickle down into heterosexual folks
Right.
because, if you're not woman enough
Mm-hmm.
to get married, if
Mm-hmm.
you're not man
Right,
enough to get this job,
right.
to marry a woman, oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's already starting to trickle down, and
No,
it's ridiculous.
yeah, and I'm glad that you bring that up too. I think that's important for people to know that if they don't think that something directly affects them, like it's going to indirectly affect
Oh
people
yeah.
eventually. I think a lot of people don't realize that though.
But even people who are very aware, I spoke at
Okay.
a 50-51 rally and I
Oh, okay.
said, you think this is only about transgender folks? Oh, no, no, no. This
Right.
is going to affect every woman and every man,
Wow.
And I started to say, are you man enough? Are you
Yeah.
woman
Yeah.
enough? Are you man enough? Are you woman enough? Because what had happened is somebody, I think it was a customer at
Hmm.
some company, complained that this woman was was a man, and in
Oh,
actual
okay.
fact, she was not.
Okay.
She was just an employee, but she
Uh-huh.
was not woman enough
Right.
for the customer to feel comfortable.
Wow.
So there you have it.
Okay.
There is a good example. And the woman lost her job because she was not
Wow.
woman presenting enough. And she
Wow.
wasn't even gay. She
Uh-huh.
wasn't even, masculine.
Uh-huh.
No, she just wasn't woman enough.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
there is the truth of what all that is about. It's not
Right.
about transgender folks. It's
Right.
about, pulling men and women into a box
Right.
that makes the dominant culture comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you're going to have, it's going to be okay to grope women in the workplace again,
Wow.
and you can't object to that. Yeah, nobody will
Wow.
believe you like they never did before. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. No.
Yeah. When they say we want to go back to the old days, we want to go back to that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that queer people are invisible. Yeah.
Right. Right. No, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the Billy DeFrank Center describes itself as a place that promotes healing through social connection, which is something that I really love and appreciate. So why do you think that connection is such a powerful form of justice?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murphy.
Okay.
Um, his advisory in 2023
Uh-huh.
talked about isolation and loneliness being an
Hmm.
epidemic in America. And
Okay.
he included in the research the LGBTQ plus community.
Okay.
And because I love research and we don't have the funding to do our own research,
Uh-huh.
he used
Mhm.
his
Okay.
research. And so we created a new mission statement. And let
Uh-huh.
me read it to you, and it'll make
Sure.
sense.
Okay.
The Billy DeFrank LGBTQ plus Center is building community and promoting the healing effects of social connection by
Wow.
hosting discussion and leadership groups, as well as diverse activities and events for
Mhm.
LGBTQ pluses and allies. So,
Okay.
what we basically do, and this is how it works really well, it's
Mhm.
amazing to me. We have discussion groups for,
Mhm.
your own peeps. We have the bisexual group, we have the gay men's group, we
Mhm.
have the LGBTQ women's discussion social group,
Okay.
we have the trans women's group, the trans
Uh-huh.
masculine group, we have the non binary group, and
Right.
there's South Bay Queer and Asian. They have
Mhm.
their own little group. And we just started working with the NAACP. They
Okay.
started an LGBTQAI group.
Oh,
And
cool.
we're going to have an event at the center.
Uh-huh.
So when people get to be with their own peeps, it's
Yeah.
really healthy to sort of expand your consciousness about who you are. And
Yeah.
then what we do is we did a listening survey about what activities would you like to do. And
Okay.
so crafting,
Yeah.
we have game night on Monday nights. Who knew that people like
Yeah.
playing board games?
That's
And
cool.
we have karaoke at Mexico Lindo because they actually have a karaoke bar.
Okay.
And we do rainbow bingo. We have
Okay.
all these activities that you get to be with people who like the same activity
Right.
across the different identities. So
Okay.
while you're playing board games, you've got gay men and trans folks and
Mhm.
non-binary folks, you've got young and old, and
Yeah.
all together getting to know people across identities. And we also have a 50 plus free luncheon once a month, and
Okay.
it's called the Vintage Discussion. And the Vintage group also does coffee at one of the coffee shops,
Okay.
once a month. And so while people are having fun doing these activities, they are developing
Yeah.
friendships with people who have common interests.
Okay. Okay.
And then they organize their own events outside. Like the
Yeah.
vintage women have organized a special, what do you call it, a text group, and they
Mhm.
go and see movies at Oak Ridge Mall when it's the
Okay.
senior discount. And so
Wow.
they do that. And then when it comes to the Oscars, they're ready because they've
Okay.
seen all the movies.
That's cool.
I
No, that's
know.
really beautiful. No, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful the way that you're seeing that too. Like, who knew like board games can like bring people together? But I feel like in a digital world, that's something that
Yeah.
maybe people are craving though, that kind of connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they get to know people have the same interests, and
Right.
then they go together to other places. And
Okay.
we now have a writing group. And so
Okay.
people like to write are getting together, and they meet outside that to do writing
Right.
together. And we also have a Billy's book club. And
Okay, that's
so
cool.
and what's interesting is it's being run by the younger people, even though some of the
Okay.
books are old, some of the books are new. So
Okay.
it's a mix. So it brings in a mix of different people to the book club. And
Wow.
so, it's fascinating how that has evolved out of our listening campaign.
Okay.
you know and then we also respond to things like a lot of people have lost their jobs,
Okay.
so we did a survey of what kind of companies you want to work for.
Hmm.
And we were thinking of doing a job fair, but we're now thinking of, partnering with
Yeah.
Work to Future, and
Okay.
they partner with the city that does big job fairs. And
Okay.
so we want to have some kind of input
Right.
with those bigger job fairs and then promote our people to go there. They can do a
Yeah.
bigger and better job. But,
Yeah.
we collaborate all over the place. Like
Yeah.
we've connected with the furries. Are you familiar with the furries?
I yes, I know what furries are, but it's yeah, if you'd like to
Yeah,
talk more
so
about like that connection,
yeah,
that's
they
interesting.
have a convention at San Jose
Right.
Convention Center, and
Okay.
we table there, and
Okay.
then they have their board meetings at the Billy DeFrank Center, you
Okay.
know. And
Wow.
the other cool thing that happens is
Yeah.
that one of our groups afterwards goes to Hop and Vine. There's all these businesses
Okay.
on the Alameda. I'm on the board of the Alameda Business Association.
Okay.
So a lot of our people will go to the different restaurants after their group,
Yeah.
and so a lot of the businesses on the Alameda are familiar with our people.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
And
that's really cool.
I know.
Yeah.
And so what happens is every year we do Trans Day of Visibility, a
Okay.
big event.
Mhm.
We've started celebrating Billy DeFrank, the person's
Okay.
birthday.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and we have a free potluck on Thanksgiving Day from noon to
That's really
3,
cool.
and also on Christmas Day. And if it kind of fits in, we'll do New Year's Eve. Like this
Yeah.
year, New Year's Eve fell on a Wednesday, which is
Okay.
always Rainbow Bingo. So we did
Okay.
a special Rainbow Bingo New Year's Eve party.
Okay. That's
We
really
had
cool.
I know we had
Yeah.
free food. We
Oh.
showed the ball drop in New York
Yeah.
at 9 p.m. and that was our cheering for the new year. And then
Yeah.
finished playing bingo, and then everyone went home.
No, I love this beautiful like sense of community that you're building and connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. So, what are some of the biggest needs that you're seeing right now among LGBTQ plus folks who come to the center?
I think the the biggest needs are, it depends who you are. The
Okay.
biggest needs right now for transgender folks is they're worried that
Uh-huh.
because the county has lost millions of dollars in health care because the federal
Okay.
government cut them off,
Right, right.
um, that they're worried that trans healthcare will be lost in the mix. So
Okay.
we have been doing a survey,
Hmm.
an anonymous survey about what are their needs as transgender folks, so that
Okay.
we can do some advocacy around
Okay.
that. Yeah. So we're responding to that need.
Okay.
And that's why we're connecting with job fairs, because a lot of people have
Yeah.
lost their jobs,
Right,
and
right.
there's a lot of food insecurity. So we've put out resources where you can get food, from
Yeah.
Harvest Food, Second Harvest Food Bank, and other places. So
Yeah.
it's a hard time,
Yeah.
but we call our place our third place. And
Okay.
our first place is home. Our
Mhm.
second place is work or school.
Uh-huh.
And our third place is where you can be fully yourself. And that's
Yeah.
the Billy DeFrank Center. And that in itself is so healing
Uh-huh.
that that's where you get to make friends, you get to build your own community.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times at Rainbow Bingo I've said, "Who's
Uh-huh.
made friends here?" And almost every hand goes up.
That's really
Yeah,
beautiful. That's really cool. And
yeah, it
yeah,
is.
yeah. No, because I know you were talking about this a little bit before, but I'd love to like hear further from you. So, how does the Billy DeFrank Center support people across generations? So you have the youth and elders and everyone in between, even, if they have those differences between them.
Well, it depends. You know,
Okay.
there are similarities and differences. You
Uh-huh.
know, we're all human beings wanting to connect with each
Yeah.
other. You know, the younger generation has a tendency to be at the board games, but then there's the older folks that go there too. The gay
Mm-hmm.
men's group has a mix of both young and older, you
Okay.
know, because gay men like to be with each other for, have
Yeah.
a discussion about gay men's issues. And so, it's really it's wonderful to watch. And
Yeah.
also, people have this image that bingo is for old people.
Okay.
We have a bunch of young
That's
people who
funny.
are regulars.
That's really cool. No, actually,
Yeah,
I went to my because I've never played bingo. I don't think either. I think I've ran bingo for like senior centers before, but never actually participated. But my friend recently took me to play bingo at a casino. It's so much fun though. I told her I
I
want to go back
know.
and play again. Yeah.
Yeah, and ours is, very affordable. It's only
Okay.
$15 for
Okay. Okay.
for
That's
10
cool.
games. And
Yeah.
we've never raised the price because we just want it to be affordable for everyone, and everyone
Yeah.
gets a thrill when they win, even though they don't win a lot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
winning is winning, and that's kind of
Yeah.
fun. And the other thing that happens is we have door prizes. And
Uh-huh.
lots of people donate the door prizes because
Okay.
it's a teeny way they can give back. People love to
Yeah.
give. And when you don't have a lot, giving a little is great.
Yeah, no, I really love that a lot. So we're living in a time of both visibility and backlash for the LGBTQ plus communities. So what do you think it means to create safety in this moment?
Well, there's different ways to create safety.
Okay.
One of the things is with our volunteers,
Uh-huh.
we make them much more aware, when we don't always leave the door unlocked because,
Okay.
it's not always safe. And
Right.
so our volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
um, they kind of know if this is a person coming in, and
Uh-huh.
if they're not sure, they'll ask them, "What are you here for?" And if they can't answer it, then they're not, one of our people. And that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is that we communicate with each other all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we do have a good relationship with the police.
Okay.
And they come to the center, the recruits come to the center and get an education about what's going on at the center. And
Yeah.
so when they become police officers, they are aware of who we are and they respond very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We are also work in the process of working on having cameras, but
Okay.
the police understand. I said, we don't want you to have direct access to our cameras because our people don't want to be,
Okay.
having Big Brother watching them.
Okay.
And they completely understood.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
our captain is Asian, so he gets
Okay.
it.
Okay. No, I love that.
He actually finished my sentence. He said, "Yeah, no, you don't want Big Brother watching you."
Yeah.
But they're going to help train us on how we can give them footage from
Okay.
our cameras, yeah, when
Okay.
they need it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
So
think
anyway,
this is, yeah.
that's part of it. And they do patrol around a lot so
Okay.
that people know that they're watching, the police are here to protect us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really love that. And I love how you just talk about like community and how, connections, how you're really there for each other. But what do you think are some misconceptions that people still have about LGBTQ plus community centers, and why do you think these matter?
Some people think that they don't need it because they
Okay.
have friends, and
Hmm.
they have plenty to do. But, they are also the ones that donate toward us. We
Okay.
have a newsletter that goes out to 6,000 people.
Okay.
And a lot of the people that don't come to the center, either because
Mhm.
they're too busy or they're, whatever, but they often donate
Mhm.
toward the center because they see the work that we do, because we're
Right.
always showing what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good thing.
Okay.
Because we're a nonprofit, we
Mhm.
don't endorse candidates or
Right.
anything like that. But we're working with the voter registrar to do voter registrations at the center and having a
Okay.
voter registration party and
Uh-huh.
for people to ask questions. So we're doing things like that. You
Okay.
know, and we
Mhm.
often have elected officials come and speak at our events. Congressmember Zoe Lofgren spoke at
Mhm.
last year's Trans Day of Visibility
Okay.
and
Wow.
talked about her support of the trans community and how,
Wow.
awful it's been in Washington, D.C. and how they're fighting back and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
stuff like
that's
that. That
really
was very
beautiful.
inspiring. And then,
Yeah.
she's had a lot of hate against her. So
Okay.
San Jose PD were doing extra security for her,
Wow.
and
Wow.
they were standing in the back of the room, and I announced, everyone,
Okay.
they're here to protect us, and they waved at everyone.
Okay. That's really
So
beautiful.
it's developing that relationship as well.
Yeah, no, that's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And
They're
how does
not
the
just protecting her, they're protecting us too.
No, right, right. No, thank you for sharing that. So, can you tell me how does the Billy DeFrank Center work with allies, and what do you think real allyship looks like beyond just performative support?
Well, PFLAG, that used to
Okay.
be called Parents and Friends of LGBTQ,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
they actually meet at the Billy DeFrank Center, moms and grandparents, you know,
Uh-huh.
um, and then there's mom hugs.
Okay.
They are allies,
Hmm.
and actually at the last Trans Day of Visibility. Um, the Unitarian Church people came as allies. They wore their little
Okay.
t-shirts and yeah. I mean,
Wow.
allyship is not just accepting who we are, but
Right.
standing up for us as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, no, this is not acceptable. And I've
Yeah.
really noticed it at the 50-51 rallies.
Hmm.
They have speakers about each issue, the immigrant
Okay.
issue, the
Right.
racial issue, and the LGBTQ issue.
Uh-huh.
But what happens is each speaker talks about all of the issues.
Right, right. No, no, I think that's cool
Yeah,
too.
being
And
an
yeah.
ally to each other, which is
Yeah.
really important. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think it's so important for like people to recognize too, like how our movements intersect with each other. So,
yeah,
that's why I'm hoping that listeners will really, take to heart to just being able to show up in solidarity, beyond
yeah,
just being performative.
yeah. I mean, there are some things that are bothering,
Okay.
like Renee Good that was
Right.
murdered in Minneapolis. There's a lot of hoo-ha around that. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that a lot of the people of color is saying, there
Yeah.
were many others
Right.
people of color who were murdered before, and there's no
Right.
no rummaging around about that. And I agree. I agree. It's
Yeah.
because she's white, and so we've got the queer person. We can say, look, who murdered her, you
Yeah.
know. And I'm grateful that there's some kind of backlash against, what happened to her. But would it be as big a movement
Right.
if she was a woman of color? And
That's what I
that
was thinking
really,
too.
really bothers me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what I was thinking too. I think it was a specific image where it was showing like pictures of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and there was like a lot of other like people like in that picture of like who were killed by ICE.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like I didn't hear like about these other people, or they might have just been a blip on the news cycle, but it just like I don't
Exactly.
yeah, it makes me think like what you know the- like what lives are more valued at, like I don't know, but I could go into that too, just about
Well, yeah, it's a
yeah.
big deal because, every year we have Trans Day of Remembrance,
Oh, okay.
which is on
Okay.
November 20th, and that is honoring all of the trans folks that were murdered that year.
Oh,
Most of
okay.
them are trans folks of color.
Right.
Most of them, a lot of them,
Uh-huh.
were killed, murdered by people they knew. And
Okay.
most of them, law enforcement did not hunt down their murderer,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
And you see, that's what is very upsetting. It just keeps
Yeah.
showing up all the time, everywhere,
Yeah.
that there's something about people of color that people do not support, do
Hmm.
not fight for, um, easily chase after and murder, and
Yeah.
nothing much happens. And that really worries me. And I really, it hits me hard
Right.
because my dad is Yugoslavian,
Okay.
and in the early 1950s, we were racially profiled and
Okay.
racially discriminated against. And I have the Yugoslavian high cheekbones, and we were
Mhm.
discriminated against racially.
Wow.
Now people have forgotten because Yugoslavia doesn't even exist anymore. There's no
Yeah.
country. But I remember what that felt like,
Right.
being racially discriminated against and picked on out of a crowd because I was perceived as that. And it
Right.
wasn't an ethnic thing, it was racial.
Yeah.
And so I know what that feels like. So I just, it bothers me a lot. And it
Yeah.
happens everywhere all the time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that too, but I really love that you're using that experience to empower other folks though. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's why I fought with the Aboriginal folks, because,
Okay, okay.
nobody forgets Black people.
Mhm.
They forget Yugoslavians, but they don't forget people of color. No.
No, with my next question, I want to hear your thoughts on, so for folks listening who may feel overwhelmed by the state of the world, what are small but meaningful ways that they can show up in solidarity though? Because that's what I want to show people. It doesn't have to be these like grand gestures, but even like daily acts. How can we like really
Well,
show up
yeah.
for each other?
Yeah, well, we talk about, make sure you're registered to vote. There's a little thing
Uh-huh.
you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a tiny thing you can do is boycott companies that have
Yeah.
dropped their DEI or never had it to
Right.
begin with. You can do that very anonymously.
Uh-huh.
Or you can contact elected officials when you feel that they should be doing something, or you're
Okay.
mad that they did do something or neglected something.
Yeah.
Getting involved that way is very helpful because elected officials do listen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what has been working, Rachel Maddow talks about that, is
Okay.
going to rallies,
Mhm.
peaceful rallies, peaceful resistance is working.
Yeah.
And there are organizations like the Gandhi Group does nonviolent communication trainings, and they
Okay.
have them online. And I put the links to that in our newsletters so that
Okay.
people are mindful of that. And they actually train volunteers to be at the 5051 rallies. And
Okay.
so if they see people getting too hyped up, and, they will go calm them down. And the point is, if peaceful resistance is working, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I go to every rally I can. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
No, I
Yeah.
love that. No, and I really love that too as a form of resistance because I keep hearing like the administration wants to create this chaos and but people are refusing to show that we're not going to be violent and people showing up in these like blow up animals and
Yeah.
having like parties and stuff, just showing like, no, we're not going to show that, you have reason to, bring this unnecessary force to
Yeah.
our
I mean,
communities.
there's different things you can do.
Yeah.
We have poster making parties at the
Okay, that's
center
cool.
for the rallies, and we bring extra ones in case people, didn't think of it. If they
Yeah.
want an extra poster to show, we give them out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
So, and
really
we
love
have this
that.
older um, woman that loves making posters, and she'll, make all these posters and give them to me to take to the rallies.
Yeah.
She's wonderful. She's like an old activist from the 60s,
Yeah.
all fired up. Yeah.
I know, I really love that. So, I'd love
Yeah.
to hear like what continues to inspire you about this work?
Well, when I was 6 years old,
Uh-huh.
I can't, I can't be back in that 6-year-old head, but I
Okay.
was very upset
Okay.
that these white Australian men were picking on my parents for not
Okay.
speaking English, go back to your country, and they were really awful to them and spitting at them.
Wow.
So here's me, a tiny little 6-year-old.
Right.
And I chased after them like a chihuahua and I
Wow.
swore at them in Yugoslavian.
Okay. Okay.
and and they ran away. And
Yeah.
I don't know why they ran away, but it was great. And
Yeah.
so late that night, my
Uh-huh.
mother is yelling at my dad, where did she learn such language? But my dad said, if
Yeah.
she would have swore at them in English, they may have hit her over the
Oh.
head, and we might be in the
Yeah.
hospital with a kid with brain damage.
Right. Right.
So he said, she's smart.
Mm. Mm.
And I had my ear to the door and I'm going, my dad thinks I'm smart.
Yeah.
So what I get out of that is I'm sure I was scared they were going to take my parents away. So I
Right.
just went at it. And when you're scared, sometimes you don't think about the consequences. But I thought
Yeah.
about it recently. Yugoslavia is close to where the Romas were, who were known to be
Okay.
gypsies and putting hexes on people. So
Okay.
I'm wondering if the Australian men thought I was putting a hex on them,
Oh, okay.
and that's why they ran away. I'm
Okay.
just wondering.
Uh-huh.
It's a speculation. But whatever it was, it worked. I protected
Yeah.
my parents
Yeah. Oh, that's
as
really
a 6-year-old. And that kind of inspired me
yeah.
later on in school,
Okay.
standing up for things that were important to us, you know.
Yeah.
And here's something you probably would never have thought of.
Uh-huh.
When I was in high school in Australia,
Uh-huh.
that's when the bikini first became
Oh,
popular.
okay. Okay.
And a lot of us girls, whether we had great bodies or
Mhm.
terrible bodies, we did not want to be exposed at the beach. And
Okay.
so I organized, we had to do sewing in
Uh-huh.
high school. So I organized for us to make the 1920s swimsuits, which were, from the
Oh,
neck down to your ankle.
right.
We
Yeah.
made those, and we would, as a group, walk
Yeah.
around the beach in our 1920s swimsuits as a protest.
Okay. Okay.
And we didn't have to say anything, but all the women
Yeah.
were going, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you
I
for sharing
know.
that.
And
Yeah.
it's like, change is not always that good.
Right, right. No, actually, with that, I wanted to hear like your thoughts on like, the future generations, because that's something important to me too, like passing the mantle to future generations of leadership. So what is your hope for the next generation of LGBTQ plus organizers, leaders, and community builders?
Well, what we're seeing is, and we're starting to incorporate, um, a number of things. We're putting a manual together about what are the important things that need to happen. You
Okay.
know, how do you open the center, close it,
Uh-huh.
clean it, and all of that stuff. Get all the boring stuff out of the way, and keep it. We do a listening survey
Okay.
every year now, and we hear back
Yeah.
what the younger people are wanting, and
Okay.
we try and incorporate them in running groups,
Okay.
into leadership positions, because all of our discussion groups and activities have
Mhm.
facilitators, and it's a good way to start being more involved
Yeah.
in a leadership position, and then there's more and more things you can get involved in. And what we're finding is when people come for one thing, there's one woman who said, I come here for the trans women's group, but I've started going to game night. And
Okay.
now I go to this other discussion group, and now I go to the crafting group.
Yeah.
So, and I can't wait for the events to come up, and,
Yeah.
so people get more and more involved, and then they
Yeah.
start taking on leadership positions, and then they will begin to shape
Uh-huh.
the next generation. We can't imagine what it will look like, but as things evolve,
Hmm.
I think they're going to do a good job, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree too. No, I'm excited about that. And thank you so much for your time. I had such a wonderful time talking with you. I think that this was such a beautiful conversation. But just as we're wrapping up, how can people support the Billy DeFrank LGBTQ plus community center? So this can be whether they're local or they're listening from afar.
Well, if you're listening from afar, some of our groups are online.
Uh-huh.
Like the bisexual group meets in person twice a month, but it also is on Zoom twice a month. So,
Okay.
different groups are either hybrid or have different, our non-binary group is
Okay.
online as well as has an in-person one. So that's one way you can be involved.
Okay.
And we are always happy to hear any suggestions.
Okay.
We just changed our website and it's
Okay.
beautiful. Yeah, brand new
Cool.
website. It looks fabulous. You can now download the calendar onto your calendar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a
Perfect.
Google calendar. But there's lots of different things you can be involved with.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you can always donate, but
Uh-huh.
that's not always the main thing. The main thing is your involvement as
Right.
a
Right.
queer person, and your ideas are really important to us because we've been here. This is our 45th anniversary year
Oh,
now.
congratulations. That sounds really
Yeah. So
beautiful.
we're doing lots of different events,
Okay.
and we're very excited about that. And I'm hoping that, we were all young,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I was 20 years old when I first got
Wow.
involved in the queer community, but
Okay.
I was even younger when I got involved in activism. And so
Yeah.
it's never ending, never ending, never ending.
Yeah. No, I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you again. But just lastly, how can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Oh, yeah. We're on Instagram and Facebook
Okay.
and also Bluehost. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's the
Wonderful.
alternative to you know what.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And we also, you can sign up for our newsletter
Okay.
and get the latest of what we're involved in, you
Okay.
know. That's, we're doing lots of different things. We're
Yeah,
doing
that's
a
amazing.
mental health
Okay.
first aid training
Okay.
that's coming up, and that's with Momentum for Mental Health.
Okay.
There's so many different ways we collaborate all over the place,
Yeah.
And this
Okay.
year we're celebrating our 45th anniversary, lots of different ways.
Okay. Okay. No,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Thank you again. I think you're such a beautiful person. You're doing amazing work in the community. I think in the larger world too, you're putting so much just positivity out there. And yeah, I wish you nothing but the best. And I hope that we can stay connected too. And I hope that you have a
Yeah,
good rest of
that
your
would be
day.
great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being here and tuning in to Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community. Your presence in this movement matters. If today's conversation moved you, share it, talk about it, and keep the work going. Together, we're not just imagining change, we're making it. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and stay in the fight.
Every time I feel so mad and sad and bad, I say to myself, relax, lean back, it's a brand new day. And every time I feel so down that a friend